Hello, or should I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm new to this. I don't know when you're watching, but welcome. Welcome to the Cook Shack. I'm here smoking a Boston butt shoulder, and I wish that I could share this lesson and also share the smells that I'm getting out of the smoker here. It's awesome. I wish that I could serve you a plate of food while I've got a few things to say, but that's not the case. Maybe back, or maybe when COVID is over, I can cook for you guys and deliver a message at the same time. So today I want to talk about resilience. Resilience is something that we kind of don't want. We kind of want to just say, "Oh, I'm done with it. I don't want anything to do with it," because it means that we have to do something. We have to be in it. To be resilient, we have to be in. We're talking about trials. We have to be resilient to our trials, which means that we're inside of the trials. The word resilience means to bounce back, to hit the ground and bounce back. What does that mean as an adult? It's different than being a child. I have two little boys and they fall off their bikes and I run over and I'm like, "You all right?" And they, "Yep, I'm good." Hop back on, keep on riding. That's resilience. That's the resilience that I want. Sometimes getting out of bed is difficult for me as I get older. But I want that kind of resilience. To be in a trial and say, "I'm all right." Now think about it as a Christian. Are you resilient in your Christian faith? When your faith is put into question, when your faith is challenged, are you resilient? Do you rise to the occasion, or do you say, "I'm just going to ignore it and pretend it doesn't happen"? Are you a resilient Christian? And what does that mean? Well, it depends on your perspective, I guess. Resilience. You know, my son falls off a bike and he's resilient. This morning, I was looking for a pork shoulder, also known as a Boston butt. And I went to Publix and I found the one that I kind of wanted, but it was a little small. And I said, "You know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to Sam's." So I went back to the truck. I put my mask away. I drove to Sam's. I put my mask back on. I walked inside. And I went and always, I recommend this. Always go to your butcher. Don't just look and peruse. Always go to the butcher. And you ask him, "Hey man, can you hook me up?" So I went there and I talked to the butcher at Sam's and I said, "Hey man, I'm looking for a pork shoulder. I'm looking for a Boston butt." And he says, "I'm sorry. I don't have any." And I was like, "Uh-oh. What am I going to do?" This was a disruption. I've got a smoke planned, and if you've done any sort of smoking, it is a production. And everything is timed out because you have, your fire has to get set. You have to have your meat set out. You have to rub it in a certain amount of time. It has to cook for a certain amount of time. Then you have to pull it out and baste it. And all that takes time. And if you want to eat at a certain time, you have to go backwards. Well, I didn't have my piece of meat. This was definitely a disruption. So then I had to go back to Publix. And I had to buy the one that I originally didn't want. And it's going to turn out it's going to be delicious. But that was a disruption. Now, let's put a little spin on it. What if I was serving the people in Honduras and they didn't have the right cut of meat? Do you think that they cared? No, they just want to eat. It's a different perspective. So resilience is different for everybody. Your perception is your reality. In that moment right there, I was dealing with a disruption. I was dealing with change. I was dealing with a trial. But it's not a trial that maybe you're suffering from, or you would think it was even a problem. The people in Honduras would certainly not think it was a problem. They just want to eat. But yet it was. That was what I was going through at the time. Right now, I'm still working. I'm blessed to have a job that I can still go to work every day. A lot of you may not. We're being affected by the same thing, by this quarantine and pandemic and COVID. We're all dealing with it. But we all have a different trial. I'm able to go to work. My work has changed a lot, but I'm able to go to work. But it's different for everybody. And I want to talk about the resilience that each one of us should have when we're in this time, especially right now, dealing with COVID. Now let's talk about James. And who was James? James was the brother of Jesus. He writes a letter to the people that were, or the Jewish people that were now Christ followers. He talks about trials. He was living in the shadow of Jesus. He was living, his brother came to him and said, hey bro, check it out. You know that I'm God, right? I'm from God. And he's like, yeah, we're all from God. He goes, no. I'm God in the flesh. And James looks at him and says, hey, that's cool and all, but when we go to school, can you keep that to yourself? He dealt with a lot being the brother of Jesus, a lot of trials, to the point where he was literally in 62 AD, he was thrown from the top of a building, and when he hit the ground, he didn't die, so he was clubbed to death because of his faith. Because of his faith. As a Christian, tell me, if you were confronted in that situation and that trial, and that was real, what would you do? James knew that he was going to have trials because of his faith. He talks about it. He talks about it in the very first chapter of James. James chapter 1, verse 2, he says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kind." Not if, but when. He's saying that trials are like taxes and death. Everybody got to do it. Not if, but when. You're going to face trials. You're going to be in the middle of this pandemic. You are going to face things that are uncomfortable and are disruptions and change. You're going to face that. But he says, consider it pure joy. Now think of the word consider. When I think of the word consider, I'm thinking of going to Chick-fil-A and I don't want pickles on my sandwich. And the person at Chick-fil-A says, hey, you should consider pickles on your chicken sandwich because it's delicious. And I think about it and I go, you know what? I will have those pickles because I thought about it. No, in the Greek, the word consider means think about it and meditate it until it becomes fact and you believe it to be true. Regard it as truth. Convince yourself that this is the truth. Don't think about it being joy. He says, you shall be joyful, but not joyful for the trial. We're not excited to be at home. We're not excited to not be at work. We're not joyful because of the trial of COVID. We are joyful in Jesus. We're joyful in our faith during this trial. And I have convinced myself to be joyous during this. And I believe it to be true. I believe at the core of who I am that I am being joyful during this, not because of it, but during it. Let's think about the next verse. He says, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance. Think about that. Think about a marathon runner that runs. Think about the people that run the ultra marathons and they persevere. That's just continuing to do something over and over again, to persevere, to keep going. Is it easy? Is it easier to keep going when you're happy? When you're joyful in a situation? Of course. If we're in this situation, this pandemic, if we're in any sort of trial and we don't have joy, it's going to be harder to be in it. But if we have joy, it makes it easier. Do we see the trial as traumatic, or do we see it as an opportunity to learn and to grow? Whatever your trial may be, are you learning and are you growing because of it? In 2008, all of a sudden I lost my job. I had just been married. I came home. I was the provider for my wife. I paid all the bills. She was still in school. I was responsible for everything. And I said, I don't know what to do. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I remembered this verse. And I remembered to say, find joy. Because in this situation, I'm learning something. I'm learning to trust. I'm learning that God is in control. I went home that day and I said, you know what? I'm going to be okay. I'm going to persevere and I'm going to be okay. But I'm not going to go to another job where I can just survive. I'm going to go to a job that I can thrive. Perseverance is not about surviving. Perseverance in Christ is about thriving. That's what the purest perseverance that he's talking about, the testing of your faith, develops this perseverance. Then it says, perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. So it's the testing of your faith that develops this perseverance. And the byproduct or the result of going through that test of faith is that God says, you're complete. You've reached maturity, you're complete, and you're lacking nothing. That's the way that I want my God to look at me. I want my God to look at me and say, you know what, Chad? He's finished the race, and he's perfect. He's mature, and he's lacking nothing. That's the test that we have to go through. And that test of faith develops the perseverance, and perseverance finishes its race. And we're complete, lacking nothing. That's what I want. You know, I'm reminded of this story. I heard as a kid. I'm going on a bear hunt, gonna catch a big one. And they encounter a wheat field and a river. And the saying goes, I can't go over it, I can't go under it, and I can't go around it. I've got to go through it. That's what he's talking about, is we've got to go through it. That's the testing of our faith. And on the other side is the maturity and the completeness and not lacking anything. And that is resilience. That's the end of it. I want to close by saying this. I want to go to the book of John. The book of John, the 16th chapter. At the end of Jesus' ministry, he goes to the disciples and he says in verse 33, I have told you these things so that you may have peace. You know, when my son falls off his bike and I run over to him and I say, hey, relax, bro. I got you. That's what he's saying here. You can have peace. Jesus looks at us and says, I got you, bro. Relax. I got you. In the next sentence, he says, hold on. In this world, you will have trouble. Remember, he says, have peace. You're going to have trouble, but have peace. And then the rest of it is so powerful and so short. It says, but take heart. Don't lose your faith. Keep your chin up. Hold your head up high. Be strong. Take heart. And then he ends it and says, I have overcome the world. There's nothing that he is going to put you in front of that he won't stay with you and help you through it. He's overcome the world. And he says, the strongest person that says that he has overcome the world, he looks at you and says, have peace. I got you. I got you. Man, that's powerful. That's my God. He looks at you, he looks at me, and he says, I got you. Have peace. I've overcome the world. I will never forsake you, and I will never leave you. I've got you. Have peace. In James, he says, consider it pure joy, but not consider it, not think about it, but actually believe it to be true. Convince your body, convince your soul to be joyful. Listen to me. These are the words that Jesus, he says to have peace. In this pandemic, in this trial, no matter what you're going through, I promise you, have peace. Be joyful. Not because of your trial, but in your trial. Have peace.